with Brother Tim and Frady here on WPMH 100.1 The Lighthouse. Picking Up the Habit explores biblical topics, culture, and the world around us through a Christian biblical perspective. Join us today and give us a call at 757 488 5299. And now, here is Brother Tim and Frady.
Happy New Year!
How'd I know you were going to yell?
'Cause
Happy New Year, sir. How are you?
I gave you visual cues.
No, you looked at me weird as a
I
difference.
did. Happy New Year.
How was your last 2 weeks? How was your holidays?
Interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah, you know they always are.
We'll talk
Happy
about-
New Year, everybody. Happy New Year. You're listening, Brother Tim, and I'm sitting here with my main man, Brady.
Hey, everybody. How you been?
Our phone number is 757-488-5299, 757-488-5299. If anything has happened over Christmas,
Give us a call.
over New Year's,
Got any
give us a
questions?
call. You
Good.
can be
Good.
listening to us on the radio. We are also on YouTube.
We are on YouTube and Facebook. Yeah, you can look us up on. Just look up "Picking Up the Habit." That is "Picking Up the Habit" on both YouTube and Facebook, and you can watch our, at least my beautiful face live. I mean, you're here too, but
I don't consider it to be a beautiful face.
look. God made me perfect. I am beautiful.
Oh, I think some people would be arguing that today. But I agree with you.
My
God
ex-wife
did
maybe,
make
but
you
that's-
perfect. Hey, everybody. You know, we were off for the holidays. Frady did last week, though.
I ended up not doing last week.
You ended
We
up not?
yeah. It's I for some reason I book guests, and then they bail on me. I need to figure. I gotta find some guests that quit bailing on me.
Go
We're-
figure.
We're gonna talk about living in a fallen world, and I had a pastor set up, and I get it. Pastors are very busy men. I do understand that they got things to do and people to see, and I get that. I begrudge. I don't hold against them. But one of these days I'll actually hold. One guest got sick. Remember we had the last time they
Right.
got sick day of,
Right.
and then yeah.
You know, I had an opportunity over the holidays. It's interesting. I've never known people to ever ask about faith.
Oh, I had a faith question too.
Sure.
I was going to ask it over the air, but you have your. I like your new idea for the show today. Better.
See,
But I did have someone reach out to me this past same thing over the holidays. I don't. They say they're a believer, but I don't believe it based on the way they live. And that's not a judge. That's not a call out. That's not just. You can tell me I can say I'm a basketball player, but I can't throw a ball in a hoop. So I can say whatever I want to be. But yeah, I had someone ask me a question over the thing. A biblical type question, same thing, and I tried to guide them the best as possible.
well, see, so being Anglican, I never realized the number of people that are in a faith, in a church, that are looking for more.
If you're in a church looking for more, you need to find a church.
Well, and that's what they're doing. That's what they're doing. They're looking for a new church. But the thing that gets me is I've never.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that's a reason to leave your church. Some people just leave churches saying they're not fulfilled. But if you're genuinely not fulfilled, like you don't feel like your church is feeding you spiritually, like regardless, I mean, it's supposed to hurt, but yeah, go ahead, leave your church.
I don't know. See, first of all, church is not a place where we're supposed to go for us.
Oh no, I agree with that. No, I agree.
We're supposed to go to church to worship God.
That I agree with, but if they're not,
okay,
I agree with that. Go ahead. Yeah.
So, if we're going to worship God, shouldn't I be able to worship God wherever other worshipers are?
Yes, but if Yes, but we also know there are plenty of wolves in sheep's clothing. So, unfortunately, and I'm not saying the majority, but unfortunately, there are churches out there, there are pastors out there who started a church, run a church, say they're being biblical, but really they're just doing it for themselves.
Yeah,
They're
I'm not arguing that is out there, but I just lately have been getting a lot of phone calls about people asking me about my God. I want to know the God you know. Well, there's only one God. Now, I I understand what you're saying, and maybe it might be better to say you want to know God how I know God more so than the God I know. Yeah, does that make sense?
It does, and it's making it when you say it like that, it makes I'm wondering, without of course knowing the full scope of it, but it makes me wonder if, and it's one of my beefs about the multiple different denominations, and I'm not talking about the non-denomination versus that we always have, but like the various number of denominations. I've always said it hurts the church more than it helps the church because everyone says they're the right denomination, Baptists, Methodists, Catholics.
Oh yeah.
So it's more sounds like as you an Anglican, they're wondering if and maybe they may go to a Baptist church or a non-denominational, and then maybe they're wondering, oh, maybe maybe your God, maybe they're thinking, yes, it's all one God, but if they don't know that, maybe they're thinking the
Right.
Baptist God is different from the Catholic
Well,
God, and
so over the past 2, 3 months, I've had about 7 individuals representing couples or families want to know more about what I believe and what the Anglican Church believes.
that's a good
So
thing.
we talk about and a lot of things. There are surprisingly a lot of differences than a lot of Protestant churches. We do believe in sacrament. We believe in real presence in communion. We believe that communion is needed at least weekly because it's our spiritual food for our spiritual selves. Um, and go ahead.
No, yeah, I agree with that part. That's a one weird thing. I haven't had communion in probably because not against this. I'm not blaming it, blaming you, but I haven't probably had communion. My church is doing an event. They do it once a month, and they do communion that night. And I don't get to go because I'm here, and that's not a bad thing. I'm still being fed, but yeah, I don't understand not doing communion weekly. That my first, yeah.
Yeah. So I had an opportunity. By the way, folks, our number 757-488-5299, 757-488-5299 if you want to join in the conversation or you have another topic. We aren't struck on this, but so I was visiting a family and they've got 4 kids. Four? 4 kids. And 2 of the kids are 10 and 13. And we were talking about volunteering at the pantry. And when kids volunteer, I normally give them the open door
Yeah, you give them the spiel,
lecture.
what they're gonna see, what they're gonna expect. Don't be
Yeah.
shocked. You're gonna get all walks of life. They're gonna smell
Yeah.
people. Yeah.
We have a talk, folks, that we are an open door ministry. What does open door mean?
Anyone's gonna walk in that door.
Anyone can walk in the door. The angel of the Lord could come in. The enemy could send his minion in. Anybody can walk in. And I do this talk with kids all the time. I mean, literally, there is no youth or younger that is allowed to volunteer at the pantry without hearing the talk.
I've heard 1,000 times.
And parents of the youth hear the talk too, because one of the things I'm always concerned about is that the kid might see or hear something
Yeah.
and then go home to talk to mom and dad, and it shocked the daylights out of mom and dad. What the heck is going on there?
I mean,
Um,
yeah.
I don't know if you remember the lady who had the gun at Black Friday 4 years ago, 3 years ago.
Yes. That was a great day.
She came back last week,
Nice.
and
Was she open carrying again?
it's no.
Okay.
It was on her chart, and I said, we haven't seen you since the little gun incident. She says, I know. I was really off my rocker back then. And she said,
I mean, that's
need
not funny, but it was
well,
funny.
and she said, should I leave? And I said, well, of course not. God gives grace. So do we. So, I just said, if you're carrying, can you put it back? Oh, I don't carry anymore. I said, well, that's nice. And she proceeded to tell me how her life has gotten better, how she's taking care of her kids, not doing drugs, et cetera, et cetera.
See, there you go. That's the whole point.
And it was very, very positive. And so I tell kids, because we have rules, and the reason why we have rules are for the safety of our kids. We have a row of tables that run down the pantry, and the kids stay behind the tables. We put the food up on the tables for the people to carry out, or for a volunteer to put in wagons or whatever to take out. But the kids cannot go past the tables without their parents' permission, period. No ifs, ands, or buts. And that's because we are an open ministry. And we can have moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas and soldiers and farmers and teachers. And, we could even have murderers.
Wasn't there a gentleman who was?
Yeah.
I remember. Yeah, right. We had a gentleman come through a couple times that was well known, publicly currently going through a case.
Right. And we also have pedophiles.
We had that situation once too. Yeah.
And
more than one.
I'm constantly on the state registry, looking in the area, looking at pictures, looking at names, just to keep up for safety's sake. Now, normally they are not allowed to come because we have youth there. And almost every single pedophile is not allowed to be anywhere where children are. But my attitude is they got to eat some way. And I'd rather have them come to our pantry and get food than to do something else for food.
True. And I know this, and you know this, and people who listen should hopefully know this, that you keep the kids safe. So if someone like that ends up in the pantry, we know there's never going to be a situation where something happens to any of our children.
Well, we keep an eye on them.
Right.
And when we used to have dinner, they didn't go to the bathroom without letting us know, to make sure that the bathroom was empty and that there was somebody else there with them. And I tell them, hey, so-and-so, I saw your picture on the state police website the other day. Oh, no. Okay, I'll leave. No. You don't got to leave. Just don't do anything, because if you fall into any of your bad habits, I'll be the first one to call the cops, and I'll be the first one sitting in the stand at trial. We've never, ever had any problems. Thank the Lord. Literally, thank you, Lord. But when I was having this talk with the 10-year-old and the 13-year-old, the 10-year-old says to me, what's a pedophile?
That's a deep question.
And mom and dad were in the room listening, and I looked, and they didn't look like they were going to jump in there. And I said to him, well, they're sex offenders. What's a sex offender?
I'm not trying to call out these parents, but did they not have any talk with the kids?
Well, I don't think it's ever come up because the kids are homeschooled. They're very well sheltered. And so I explained that a sex offender was an adult who did sexual things with children that they should not do. And the look that I saw on that child, I'll remember, because I just took his innocence.
Unfortunately, anyone who does ministry like us and preaching and stuff like that, we've all been there, unfortunately, and it's the not so fun part of being a teacher
Our,
of the gospel sometimes, and answering questions like that.
our number 757-488-5299. His face crunched up and he started to weep. And then he started to cry. And then he started to bawl. And I asked him what he was crying for. And he said, "Why would somebody do that to kids?" And I just tried to explain to him how there was evil in the world. You know, that question that I get asked so often, why do good things happen or bad things happen to good people? You can't say, well, because of sin in the world, and where one by man sin entered into the world, and death. I mean, you just to parrot the Bible is just not going to work in this situation. And this kid's very smart, but this was not something he'd been exposed to.
Unfortunately, that's the standard answers most people give because
And
sin is in the world.
I explained to him that there was evil in the world, and a lot of people do evil things. But then I told him that I was also one of those people, that I'd been in jail at one point and returned back to God and became repentant. But for the rest of the night, I I I, I didn't feel guilty per se, but I felt awful. And I don't know, folks, because here's the thing. I went afterwards. Before I left, I spoke with mom and dad privately, and I apologized. And I said, I am sorry I took your son's innocence. And their response was very practical. We're glad it was you, somebody he knows and respects. And we were there, and any other way would not have been. I mean, there's no good way to it, but we're glad it wasn't on the streets or on the news or on the internet. He found out in probably one of the best ways.
I mean, yeah, sure, you're right. I mean, that is probably one of the better ways to learn or something like that. Correct. And yes, yes. I just want to say one thing though. You are not like that. Yes, you went to jail. We've talked about that in the show. You just missed, but you made a very different type of mistake.
Yes, not that. I was a drug dealer.
Okay, there you go. Yes,
Um,
I knew that, but yes.
and you guys can look in the paper. It's been listed, and I'll talk about it. All you got to do is call and ask. But the question that I've had, and I've asked a lot of my homeschool parents, and this is what I'd like to get your input. Our number is 757-488-5299, 757-488-5299, especially if you homeschool. I know that a lot of people take their kids out of public education because they want their kids to have a better education. I don't know how many of you pull them out because you're trying to shelter them, but rather you want them to have the best education possible. And that might coincide by some of the things that are taught in public schools. Does that make sense?
It does, and everyone I know lots of lots of people in my church homeschool. We actually have a whole homeschool like section of people who get together to talk about it. I don't know of anyone who's taken their children out of school for fear of them learning the world, because they're going to learn the world at some point regardless. Not that they don't want to control it at some point, but yeah, I don't know of anybody.
Right.
Everyone I know that's pulled their kids out of school and homeschooled, it's because they want to give them a more, I wouldn't say a better, but a more realistic, I guess, education. Because unfortunately, public schools nowadays are just basically hitting metrics to pass a test more than actually teaching the children.
But I would venture to say that over the past 5 or 10 years, a lot more people are pulling kids out because of the things they are being taught.
That is true. I mean,
DEI and all that sexual stuff and all that. 10 years ago, kids weren't going to school or pulled out of the schools to avoid topics. It was because their kids were not being well taught, or they figured that they could be better taught at home.
Yeah.
So my question was to my people that I've run across, if you've pulled your child, or I don't even want to say pulled, because you may never even put your child in public schools. And remember, during our Thanksgiving show, we always talk about what happens when your kid is mixed with kids that have two mommies or two daddies. And lots of times I've said that to a lot of churches, and a lot of parents are going, well, they see that anyway because it's in public school. So when do you feel it's appropriate? And do you do it by stages or all at once, where you start teaching your kids about evil in the world? Because this young man, he got the whole thing kind of at a bombshell at 10.
I don't know. As a former youth leader, I could tell you I would not teach hardcore things like that to my elementary students.
But did your elementary students know that there were bad people who did bad things?
In a way, yeah. I mean,
see, that's what I'm talking about. Did you introduce them? You don't give them all the dirty nitty gritty.
You do it in a step. You do it in a step where, yes, there is evil in the world. Like, why did grandma die? Why did somebody die? Why did someone do? You can't. Some things you just cannot avoid. You know what I'm saying? There's just things you cannot avoid. So you do it in an appropriate way. I know that's what we did, when I was in youth. You do it in an appropriate way for their level. What I would definitely not. I mean, my high school kids, I'll tell them the truth. I'll tell them like right as much as their parents will allow me, of course. But I'll tell them everything. I mean, I'm not my high school kids. I will lay it out like you did to this 10-year-old. No, I mean, and even more if it's appropriate, But yeah, I mean, I think at any point we should tell anyone evil unfortunately happens in the world. Satan. I'm not going to put it all on Satan, of course, but I mean, there's a fight. I mean, Adam and Eve. I mean, it's a fallen world. It's
and this is the thing. If you look at it a certain way, I would have said that 30 years ago, kids were not as a group dealing with death.
Oh no, of course not. But the world
now, you do it because there's a shooting in a school in your own neighborhood.
Correct. The world is a much worse off place. Is the nicest way I could put this than it is. I mean, and the world is the world is more the world than it was 30 years ago. We didn't have I've always said so, and it's in part, and part of that is just the growing social media, the growing technology. We can literally watch you can watch around the world, all over the place. So when there is a school, don't get me wrong, where school shootings happened 30 years ago, of course they were, but you would not have gotten that same news broadcast. The whole world would not have known about it like they did 30 years ago. And not that that's a bad thing or a good thing, it's just the way it was. So like the only time you would learn, the only time you would have conversations like that with your children 30 years ago is if something locally happened.
But see, that's just it. Now, because of the internet, it's everywhere.
Correct. It's evil's
But
everywhere.
homeschool kids, lots of time, don't have
That is true.
access to the internet. Whereas recently, in the past 20 years, you can't get by without seeing it,
Correct.
without hearing it.
Correct.
I mean,
you can't be on Facebook nowadays without knowing every bad thing that happens, because it's going to be all over your Facebook wall or your TikTok. Or
I got a better one. How about the fact that your school bag has now got to be clear?
That's true.
First, second grade.
I know you're referring to Newport News. People feel either way about it, but yeah, it's you got to explain that. Mommy, why do I need to? Mommy, Daddy, why do I need to bring a clear backpack? Why can't I bring my SpongeBob backpack? Well, Johnny, because unfortunately Susie might have a gun or a knife or do something to you.
That and that's a recent change. I mean, if you think about it now, kids that are in second grade 4 years from now, they're not going to know any difference because that's what they always carried.
Correct. I mean, 30 years ago, you brought a gun to school. No one, I mean, not elementary school students, but like in high school, 30 years ago, you see rifles and you would, they didn't think of those things because, and I'm not saying it's, you go ahead.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from, but 15, 20 years ago, maybe 30 years ago, when I was in, if somebody brought a gun to school, we would freak out, but we wouldn't freak out to this degree. But a lot of my classmates had rifles hanging in the back of their trucks that they would go hunting with.
Same with my high school. I mean, I graduated in 95. We got Vertorian on the line.
Hey, Vertorian, what would you like to add to the conversation? By the way, Happy New Year. Real quick, we've only got about 4 minutes.
Happy New Year.
We got about 4 minutes.
Just calling to say Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well.
You guys stay encouraged as always. Y'all are doing a great job, great ministry. I'm hearing the conversation right now. There is no way, to be honest, to sugarcoat it. We're supposed to give the gospel full and free. So if you can make it simple and plain for a child to understand the gospel, if you make it simple and plain for a child to understand what sin is, I don't know why adults don't understand. So, but y'all keep doing the good work.
All right. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
All righty. I appreciate it.
Have a good night.
Have a Happy New Year.
You too.
It was disturbing to me. If you're listening, we've got to be taking a station identification break in a couple of minutes. But I'd like to hear from you. I'd like to know, now that I'm thinking this through a little bit, when I was dealing, the conversations back when I was a kid was about the birds and the bees. It wasn't about this level of violence.
I mean, yeah, that's a big. I mean, unfortunately, but even now, the birds and the bees. Before your parents even think about having a conversation, one of your friends, you've already seen something on social media on your phone, and one of your friends is already probably doing it.
I kids are doing it. I mean,
it's all over TV. You can't even watch 6 o'clock TV anymore without seeing.
No,
sex.
I mean, we had the 11 and 12-year-old couple that were
right.
To call them a couple, mom and dad. I mean, that was 3 years ago. Anyway, folks, it's going on top of the hour. We've got to do a station identification break because you're listening to Picking Up the Habit here on the Lighthouse Radio Network. Our call-in is WPMH Radio, AM 1270, 96.9, and 100.1 FM. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to The Lighthouse, W245CK Suffolk, W261DI Norfolk, and WPMH Newport News.
Listen to The Lamppost, right here on The Lighthouse, a ministry of the Colonial Heights Church of Christ in Norfolk. We will light your way to the Lord, helping seekers become disciples and growing strong believers for His service. The Lamppost, right here on The Lighthouse. With God's help, we will light your way home to Him.
Hey everybody, Greg Laurie from A New Beginning. Did you know that more than 80 million Americans depend on AM radio for conversation, news, weather reports? Many of those AM stations carry the Word of God. Well, listen, there's a new bill in Congress that would ensure AM radio remains in cars, because when cell and internet services are down, this free service could be your only access to vital communication. Visit dependonam.com.
Mold, trash, rodents, snakeskin, even deceased animals. No, this isn't a Halloween shopping list. It's what might be under your house, in your crawl space. Schedule a free crawl space inspection with the Crawl Space Company and find out what's in your crawl space. Call 757-394-3494 to schedule your free inspection or visit thecrawlspacecompany.net. So, do you know what's in your crawl space?
Actual client review of Hartman Dentistry.
I just want to say that I just went to Dr. Hartman, and she is absolutely wonderful.
What did you think when you walked in? Did it just feel like it was a relaxing place to be?
Yes, it's very nice, very clean, very bright. You're not sitting in a room with just four walls. The room that I was in, you could see outside.
Did you have a wait before you walked in?
I was there maybe 15 minutes before I got into the office, and so I got into my chair, and then maybe another 30 minutes while the technician, did X-rays and all.
And so, are you going to go back and get your teeth fixed the way she says?
I'm going to try. I am going to try because I really trust her. And the only reason I went is because you thought so highly of her.
I got to tell you, I'm in love.
Give Hartman Dentistry a call at 757-873-3407.
And welcome back to the Rave and the Nave, happening today in St. George's over in England. Oh, wait, that was last Friday.
Are you back at? Are you back?
I'm not joking you.
I believe you. I was
They
wondering if you.
did a rave in a cathedral over in the Church of England.
I got nothing. This is why people hate religion.
According to the church, they were running short on giving. And so they needed to raise funds, and so they did it in, I believe it was Thomas.
Did any of
Mertens.
Did any of the staff give up their pay?
Well, I don't know. You know that you probably not, but they had a rave. I was just so appalled that you would do that in a church.
Hey, come as you are, right? Come as you are.
I am Brother Tim. You're listening to me and Freddie here on the
Lighthouse Radio Network.
Thank you much.
WPMH 100.1.
And we've been talking about sheltering our children. Wouldn't that be a good way to sum that up?
Yeah. I do want to hear from parents. I mean, if there's someone listening right now, 757-488-5299. Do you homeschool your children, and why? Is it because of educational purposes or because you don't want your children to know what's going on with the world? We'd like to hear from you. Once again, 757-488-5299.
And what happened was last night I was talking to a 10 and a 13-year-old about volunteering at the food pantry, and that we're an open door ministry and that we have all sorts of people who come there. And I think any food pantry would need to be honest and say, well, do you honestly think? Well, there are some food pantries that only let church members, but we've always talked about it. What are you going to do when gay people come to your church? Are you going to welcome or not? What are you going to do? Now, my church in Norfolk does have a policy. If a sex offender comes in, they're not allowed to sit next to kids. They got to sit at the end of the pew. They got to sit by themselves. There's an escort that meets them in the parking lot. It's got to be with them all the time during the church. And I told,
do people know they're sex offenders then?
Well,
like
the vestry knows, the leadership knows, but the rest of the company or the rest of the church membership
doesn't.
But
I'm okay with that.
If you watch it happen,
right,
something's going on.
Like, I'm okay with that. Like, you got to be safe. You got to take precautions. Even churches, open door ministry. You have rules. You have safety. Churches, open door ministry. Come as you are. Yes, if a pedophile or someone who's been, I'm not going to call him someone who has been charged with pedophilia and like they got found guilty, they're on the registry. You just gotta go with the fact that they're on the registry.
And frankly,
you got to be safe.
Most of them are still going to be braceleted, and according to their release paperwork, they're not allowed to be someplace where kids are. So they got to give notice to churches,
right? Technically,
to find out, is it okay for us to come?
Right.
Okay.
Correct.
But
the church should, if they can meet the safety requirements to keep the children and people who need to be protected. I say they should let them still come to church. They need God. They need Jesus. They need to.
And that's where a lot of people are coming from. Our number is 757-488-5299. 757-488-5299. I'd like to hear what you have to say about this, because homeschooling to me is about the level of education you get. The sheltering is a byproduct of the homeschool, in my mind. I don't know that people go to homeschool to shelter and the education is the byproduct. I think they want the best education that they can get. I've got was he 13, 14? No. A high school kid that was told that he could take community school classes while he's in high school, and the school would pay for it, and he could graduate with his associates. I think that's excellent. My niece did that. She graduated in college before she graduated in high school. Floored me out. I thought I was so old. I said, wait a second. How is she graduating from college already? I'm not that old, am I? And they went, no, she doesn't graduate from high school for 2 more weeks.
Nice. I took college classes in high school.
She had an associate's degree for 2 years, and state schools took all the classes and credits. Who's on the phone?
We got Milton on the phone. He has a comment about the question you asked.
What would you like to add to the conversation?
Good evening, gentlemen. Well, first off, happy 2024 to y'all. Enjoy listening to your show. What I wanted to add is my wife and I, we actually homeschooled our children, or I should say she did most of the homeschooling, of course, because I was working, but we decided to go the homeschooling route when our children were really younger. I would say maybe under the age of 10, I can recall. But a lot of it was because of a point that you had just mentioned about how the public school education system, especially in this day and age, they're not going to teach you the ways of God. Or in a lot of the cases, if you go praying, then you'll be in some serious trouble if you're praying to God and everything that entails in that. So that was the main reason why my spouse and I decided to homeschool, but also to spend that one-on-one time with them, and help them. And of course, the homeschooling curriculum has its own gaps and everything like that. So just to make a long answer short, we went the homeschooling route with that because of the way the public school education system was.
Okay, so Milton, when you were teaching your kids, did you do a gradual? So in this instance, we were talking with this young man. He totally did not know what pedophilia was, didn't know what a sex offender was at 10. But when I answered that there's evil in the world, did you teach in a way that you gradually broach topics earlier and gradually fluffed them up, filled them out as they got older? Did you just wait until an incident happened and that was the motivation to bring up those types of topics?
Pretty much, in our case, we talked about it. We didn't go full steam ahead as far as overloading them with what pedophilia was or any type of sexual deviancy or immorality or anything. Of course, first we ended up going to the Bible and just talked about the verses that do talk about fleeing from sexual immorality and what they were. And like you were saying, as the older they got, then we gradually tell them, okay, this is what this part of sexual immorality is. This is what that part is of that as well. So it was like a gradual process. It wasn't like a full, okay, here it is. You gotta we'll talk about it one time or whatever the case is, and then you're supposed to learn what it is by trial and error. No, we didn't go down that route. It was a gradual process.
So they knew that mommy and daddy got married and they did things together, and then later on mommy and daddy had mommy and daddy time at night, and then later on it just kept as needed.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate it, Milton.
Yep, no problem. Y'all have a good evening.
You too. Thank you for listening and have a blessed new year.
All right, y'all do the same.
You too. And I think that's where I think this, because I interact with a lot of different faith groups, a lot of the kids are fascinated with the fact that I wear a habit. I can remember I had a church where...
Is it the habit or you look like Friar Tuck?
Whatever. Santa Claus during Christmas.
Yes, you do.
I had a young lady that she told me that one of her friends saw me at Walmart, and I said, why didn't you come up and say hi to me? And she says, oh, because you're so holy. And I was like,
see, that's so hard sometimes.
Because you know me, I'm nowhere near holy.
I mean, I know you. We're all sinners. Everyone who knows anybody, but I get that. I get that same. I'm not saying as much as you because you are definitely much more popular than me. But people who know me and my situation and what I go to school, same thing. It's like, oh, if I do,
yeah. And so I ended up after about 2 weeks, I went to their youth pastor and said, "Listen, I need to talk to your youth here a little bit about what it is that I do."
Like people watch themselves when they curse around me. Like they're like, "Oh my God, it's afraid." Like, oh, calm it down.
Yeah, and so I got asked to do, first of all, youth group. If you need an event, I thought this was the best I ever had. They had a progressive youth retreat during the summer. So what is a progressive youth retreat? It's a way to do a youth activity, and it doesn't cost the kids or the parents anything. So on Friday night, they go to a house where they serve them a hot dog, lunch, dinner, or whatever. Okay. Then they have a teaching, and then they have an evening activity, maybe a swimming pool.
Right.
Sparklers, 4 square, 9 square. Then they go home. Saturday morning, they wake up, meet at the church, and they drive to so-and-so's house where they have breakfast. They have a teaching that's a little bit longer. They have an activity. At lunch, they go to a different house. In the afternoon, they were always at the swimming pool or next to the beach. At dinner, they went to another house. And then on Sunday morning, they met for breakfast and then went to church. It was a great time. It was great. And I was asked to lead a session for the boys. And the boys were 10 to 17.
That's a yeah.
It was a
You
spread.
should break
but,
those up. Middle
well,
school
there
to high
wasn't
school.
enough. There wasn't enough.
I know, but that's hard.
I know. So anyway, I knew all the boys.
Oh, it must have been.
And so I said, so your pastor has asked me to lead a workshop. What would y'all like me to talk about?
Was it Stoller or Ferguson?
Sex.
Of course it was. Of course, we've had this talk. I know what you were coming with.
And I was like, actually, guys, I think that's something your pastors should probably teach.
Again, which one?
But what would you think we should do outside of that? And they all just kind of looked at me blankly. And so I went back and I spoke to the pastor and the assistant pastor, both at the same time, and said, listen, I'm more than happy to do the talk, the lead us talk.
We did a whole show based off of this.
And the fact that the pastor, they both were fine. Now, when you do that for another youth, it's man, I just tell
But see,
you.
that's also why I don't think middle schoolers and high school, because it's a completely different conversation.
Not now. It wasn't 10 years ago.
No, 10 years ago, but this incident did not happen 10 years
Yes,
ago.
it did.
No, it
Yeah, it
did.
did.
It? Oh,
Yeah,
gotcha.
it did.
I thought it was more recent.
No, it happened almost 9 years ago. Exactly.
All right.
So anyway, the key thing is, folks, when you're working with your youth, you know, you got to be careful about these things because the youth have questions. And what that was kind of an indication to me is that the youth were not in a place where they felt that they could ask those questions.
That's true. Again, I'm gonna put on my youth leader hat. Yes, and I'm not gonna call out because the people you're talking about in this instance, I know they were friends, but that's also a bad thing because listen, especially your high schoolers, sex is in the Bible. Jesus, like it plain out takes that, you know, Mary had a baby without being intimate with Joseph. So if you're teaching those things, they're going to be questions at some point. You have to be prepared for that because someone's going to go, then if it was Jesus, how do no babies come out? Someone's going to ask that question. You have to be prepared.
Yeah, well, and
that means in my mind, they're not being taught those things. Then I'm wondering what they're being taught.
I just had a 15-year-old the other night talk to me about his brother who's gay getting married.
I mean,
and he said he wasn't going to go because he's a good Christian. I said, wait a second. You were just telling me that you and your girlfriend and
right. They don't see the.
You know what he said?
That's different.
Well, he said, one, that's different. And my brother's double sinning. I said, double sinning?
Having sex with a boy.
And having sex outside of marriage.
Right.
I just had sex outside of marriage.
Right.
So since I only sinned once and he's double sinning, that makes him worse than me.
Yeah, that means that youth leader has not taught a sin is a sin is a sin.
But is a sin a sin?
Mean, look, we can go into that long. The Bible points out things. We can have that long drawn out. We don't have time today. We got 12 minutes. So yes, but in the most regard, I'll be the first person to tell. Don't.
I would say that sexual sin is sexual sin.
Yes, no. That's a whole.
No, I'm going to say sexual sin is sexual sin.
I will disagree. And there are parts in the Bible that says that Jesus looks down on different parts of sin, but having sex outside of marriage or having sex with a man or a woman of the same sex and lying, in my mind, is the same thing in God's eyes. If I lie to
sexual sin is sexual sin.
Correct. All sexual sin combined. Correct.
But that's why I'm saying in his mind, because it was with a guy, it was twice as worse than him with a girl outside of marriage.
Yeah. Let me talk to those kids
equal.
for you. Correct.
Yeah, I know. But that's the point I'm trying to make.
I know.
I mean, I have found out, folks, with what happened last night, and what's going on in the world today with the youth that I work with. And I see a lot of different youth from a lot of different churches that we need to be careful, not only about what we talk about, but what we don't talk about. I recently was going to go see a newly released movie that was just released 3 weeks ago. I've been waiting for it for over a year. The new Willy Wonka movie.
Oh yeah.
And
I
I was like, let's go. And I was sitting with an adult friend and we were even quoting the movie. I mean, the Wonka movie is one of those movies that everybody loves.
Did they have? Wonder if they have that line in the new movie.
Well, I don't know if it's in the new one, but we remembered it from the old one. And one of his kids asked what a snozberry was. And I thought, oh, they're like gooseberries. And so both he went to his Siri and I went to my Google. Thankfully, my Google wasn't on volume and his Siri was on volume and we had to quickly shut it off.
Here's the problem. All right, so you want to tell folks? You want to tell them?
I'm not going to tell them.
Google.
You need to look it up on your own and make sure that you're in a place where it's confidential.
But here's the problem. See, no one would have known that. No one. I don't know. That stuff's been happening for decades, though.
Yes, and when it does,
songs, movies, children's stuff,
call it out,
right?
And people who are good parents.
But see, that's this new. I'm not saying it in a bad way. Please don't call me and scream at me. That's where cancel culture comes in a good way lately.
Define what
well, because now once you know what that means, I would not like. Now that I know what that means, I would probably not encourage young children to watch that movie. I would not have parents because then they might look it up. They might ask that question and then try to find out.
Well, yeah, but that's why I'm thinking about not going to see the new one. But then again, can you we're back to the homeschooling thing again.
I think that's more like the
Disney. How many Disney movies? By the way, folks, of those of you who don't know, Steamboat Willie is now open public domain as of yesterday.
Yeah, Steamboat Willie. They already made a horror movie over it.
And but you begin to look at movies that you can't see anymore. I actually had a copy of Song of the South. Had no idea that you can't get that anymore because it's a racist movie. Is there movies out there that are age appropriate? I just don't know.
Baby Shark. Baby Shark.
That's
Baby
not
Shark.
a movie.
Movies that are age appropriate?
Although it is and possibly could be a soundtrack for a rather lengthy family documentary.
I mean, movie-wise, we could literally, you could comb through any movie and find something wrong with it if you point it out. SpongeBob. You could go through the SpongeBob TV shows and movies, find a.
I would never think that SpongeBob.
Oh yeah,
should be a kids movie.
Of course, it's a kids movie. It's on Nickelodeon.
Yeah, there's a lot of things on Nickelodeon.
Correct. Well, nowadays, but it was on Nickelodeon back when Nickelodeon was supposed to be pure. Yeah, I'm not saying it was, but when it was supposed to be.
See, I don't know.
I mean, you could find. That's the problem. Adults who make those shows, like the Snozberry situation, they do that for their own jokes. Like it would have never. I never heard about it until today. I never even thought about it. It's never become a big deal.
Well, see, that's the other thing. We are back to the internet.
Right. Correct.
Because you and I heard that. And we would have not known what it meant.
Correct.
Because we could not find it in any publication.
I mean, I don't believe it
until lately.
I don't even think he did an interview.
I mean, freedom of information is the thing. And this is why kids, parents, if you got your kids on tablets and all that, I hope you have them properly protected. Our number is 757-488-5299, 757-488-5299.
Well, we
It's
only got 5 minutes, so make it quick if you call.
just something to be concerned about, folks. Dealing with youth. I could never be a parent. Parents, you have my prayers all the time. Those of you that are good ones, those of you that are bad ones, I pray for you too, but in a much different vein. We have a lot of people out there who don't want to be parents. Unfortunately, they're doing things that made them parents way too soon.
Yeah, see the interview where the author of Willy Wonka wasn't until 2012. So he kept that secret until 2012.
So maybe. Anyway, next week.
I got a good one for next week.
Oh yeah, what is it?
I'm gonna wait till then. The one I was gonna ask you today.
I can't get prepared.
No.
Why not?
Because I don't want to.
I don't.
Just
You
not.
don't want to.
You don't prepare me.
Yeah, but mine haven't been defending in faith.
This one's a good one.
I know you're going to ask me a woozy, aren't you?
I'm gonna ask a question that I got asked. Where someone asked me a religious question, and I answered the best of my ability, but I want to get other people's opinions of it.
Well, we know what opinions are like.
We got some good ones in there.
All
Hartman
right.
Dentistry
Hartman Dentistry.
sponsors. Yeah.
Yeah. Dr. Vanessa. She's back in town. She was out of town for the holidays. Dr. Vanessa Hartman is one of the best going. I want to say the best.
The best.
In-house lab work, 3D all-around photography of your mouth, which is really kind of bizarre. She can do dentures in and out in a day. They are very, very, very people sensitive, and they are booked. So if you want to get in, you need to call Hartman Dentistry at 757-873-3407. That's 873-3407. Tell them you listen to Picking Up the Habit, and they will put you on their emergency short call list.
But be ready.
What is that? That means that if somebody calls tomorrow afternoon, they call you to fill that spot.
They might call you at 9 a.m. Be here by 11.
And they could. But that way you can get in and get seen. And as always, let them help you get your smile back. We all look so much better when we smile. And don't forget to call Worley's Home Services. 757-356-4117. That's 356-4117. We had Vortorian on the other week. Did an excellent job at his house. Vortorian gave a wonderful shout out for all the beautiful work they do. Give Chuck and Chase Worley a call at 757-356-4117. Folks, we have not been hit with our traditional winter weather yet. I see that we're supposed to be getting something this weekend. You might want to get them out. Get yourself looked at before you need your heater. Get it done now. 757-356-4117. See you next week.
Also, don't forget to check out our Facebook and our YouTube. Look up Picking Up the Habit. We're trying to get more followers back on our Facebook page and, of course, our YouTube. You can watch old videos if you missed any of this or you want to just rewatch today's episode. You can check it out. Picking Up the Habit.
We will see you next week. God bless you. May you have a happy new year. And if you need anything, call us here at the station. Again, have a nice night, and thank you for listening to the Lighthouse Radio Network here in Chesapeake, Virginia on WPMH, AM 1270, 96.9, and 100.1 FM. God bless.